Hello students, my name is Amit and today we are starting with the second lecture of auditing. In the first lecture, I had covered the meaning of auditing, objectives of auditing and the definitions of auditing. Today we are going to cover principles of auditing. So audit, each functionality has some principles to follow. For auditing as well, there are multiple principles which are supposed to be followed by everyone. So the first principle that is there is principle of competency. So according to the Act of Chartered Accountant of India, so the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India has the act, and it governs, or it mentions that the audit has to be done by a competent person who is a qualified chartered accountant. So other than chartered accountant, no one should be doing the audit of the company except the internal audit. If for internal audit, companies can hire some other firms, or they can have their internal department set up in the organization so to carry out the audit. But for statutory audit, company must hire a firm of chartered accountants or individual chartered accountant to complete the auditing, to get the audit done of their financial statements. Second is principle of independence. The competency is a different part and independence is different part. A chartered accountant is a competent authority to complete the audit, but whether he is independent or not, whether he is carrying out his responsibilities independently or not, is also one of the key area to look into. So the auditor must be independent. Independence implies acting without any fear or favor. So let's say if I am working in some organization, and the firm that has been appointed to do the auditing have some of my friends working in it, and if they do give some favors to me, if I willfully omit something from the books of accounts, if I commit a fraud, if I have misstated something in the financial books, and if those appointed chartered accountants being my friends, if they ignore such mistakes, then they are surely not doing their work independently. So independence is nothing but independence is not freedom. Independence is carrying out their duties diligently, ethically, and in a clear manner. So this is what the principle talks about. In order to protect the independence of the auditors while appointing the auditor of the organization, there is a list of people who should not be appointed as auditor as mentioned by the Companies Act 2013. Who are those people? An officer or the employee of the company that is being audited. Just like the director of the organization, he can't be an auditor, because for internal audit, as I mentioned, there has to be a separate department set up in the organization to do the auditing. A person who is a partner or who is in the employment of an employee of the company, let's say any employee of the organization, including its directors, they cannot become auditor of the organization. A person who is indebted to the company for an amount exceeding 1000 rupees, or who has given guarantee in connection with the indebtedness of any third person for the same amount. So let's say if you have bought something from the company that is being audited, and the value is more than 1000 rupees, in that case you become disqualified to become the auditor of that particular company. Or if your friend has bought something, or if your relative, if your partner, anyone who has bought something from the company, and that person has some relation with you, some or other relation with you, in that case as well you cannot become the auditor of the organization, because then you become disqualified. The company auditor cannot hold any security of the company which carries voting rights. I cannot be a shareholder of the organization which I am auditing, because a shareholder is the owner, legal owner of the company, and the owner cannot be an auditor of the organization, because he will not comply with all the regulatory requirements, or he cannot ethically do the auditing of the organization. A statutory auditor cannot be appointed as an internal auditor. It's obvious, because statutory audit is the purpose of statutory audit is to provide the information about the true and fair view of the balance sheet. But for internal auditor, normally his purpose is to check the internal controls of the organization, and major reporting is done to the internal stakeholders. Internal stakeholders means the top management of the company. Whereas in case of statutory audit, the requirement is that the audit report is submitted to the registrar of the companies and not to the internal stakeholders. An auditor should not accept contingent fees. So if an auditor has accepted some contingent fees, etc., in that case, that firm or the auditor automatically disqualifies himself to become an auditor of the organization. Third principle is principle of integrity. Integrity implies moral character or honesty. An auditor must be prepared to resign rather than signing a document which he knows does not exhibit a true and fair view of the books of accounts. So let's say again the same example: if the firm that is auditing my books of accounts, or the chartered accountant who is coming as an auditor in my organization, if that person is a friend of mine, then I may ask him to sign some documents just because of the friendship that we share. So that he is not doing. It's not integrity, right? He is not being an honest person, an honest auditor. So the requirement is that the person who is auditing the books of accounts must have that honesty and should not sign any documents which he is sure that are not exhibiting any true and fair view of the books of accounts. Principle of confidentiality. So the word itself says that whatever the auditor checks, whatever the auditor knows about the organization that he is auditing, he should keep that information to himself or herself. Even if, let's say, there's a team of auditors who is there to conduct the audit. So if one person is doing auditing of accounts payables, other person is doing auditing of accounts receivables, if third person is doing auditing of tax matters, fourth person is doing audit of human resource related files, then even within the team also they should not share these things to others. That's the confidentiality that they have to maintain, because it is also possible that the person you are sharing the information with is some sort of enemy of the organization. They want to they may want to they may want that company to suffer, and the critical information they may supply to the competitors of the organization they are auditing. So that's the reason why they should not share any information to anyone. They should keep it to themselves. Then the next principle is principle of documentation. So as I mentioned while explaining the definitions in the first lecture, that you will have this line mentioned in almost each and every definition of auditing, that is, as per the information and explanation given to the auditor, he is signing this document. So the documentation is nothing but whatever he is being told, he should keep each and everything documented. So let's say if he checking some accounts payable related entries, he should ask for the invoice copies that are booked. He should ask for the proof of payment to the vendor. He should ask for the purchase order details. He should ask for the goods received note copy. He should ask for the transportation details. I mean, the invoice of the transporter, the delivery challan of the transporter. He should ask for these documents as an evidence to check one transaction. But if the internal control system of the organization is really good, if they are following some good system like SAP, Oracle, or systems, then in that case the auditor may may do his checking by sample instead of doing 100% audit. It totally depends on the discretion of the auditor. So the principle of documentation is that you have to keep everything documented, whatever you are checking, whatever verification you are doing, you should have all your evidences, documents readily available. If you are required to submit it to someone in future, you need to have it, or you may use those documents as a reference in future. Then the next principle is principle of planning. Planning in itself says that this word in itself is clear. As I mentioned while explaining the definition of auditing, we need to have a clear-cut audit plan. We must have a team assigned to perform auditing of each function, each department of the organization. So if you don't have the audit plan, you won't be able to understand how many people are required to complete the auditing in the designed period. So, and in audit plan also, it has to be detailed plan. I mean, if I just mention that accounts payable, so and so person will do the auditing for these many days, no. Each day, what is the area of the accounts payables team or accounts payable function that person has to cover? How much audit should be completed in how many days? So detailed plan is prepared and has to be prepared by the auditors before they go for the audit. That audit plan has to be shared with the client so that even their team is also prepared. They can give some time to you, because you cannot disturb the routine business of the client. So you have to discuss, you have to share that audit plan as early as possible before you go for the audit, so that even those people, the people working at client side, can take out some time from their routine work and can spend some time with you all to discuss about the queries, provide explanations to you, provide documents to you. Even they also need to have some time frame available with them. Principle of audit evidence. So the evidence, as I mentioned earlier, that principle of documentation, I covered this point in documentation as well, because documentation and evidence is, for me, it's one and same. It is just that in this point they have mentioned it, they have split the types of evidences. That is, one is inspection. So while inspecting the books of accounts, if you come across some issues or if you come across some frauds, those things should be kept as evidence. Then observation. So while you are roaming around the client organization, so by observation, if you see something and if you feel that it's worth reporting in the audit report or should be kept documented, let's say any process, how the organization works, what kind of compliance they follow. So such things you observe. You don't need to have any person to give you any documents to understand such things. You, by just roaming around, by just talking to the people, you can arrive at some judgment. You can give some judgment about it. Then inquiry and confirmation. So I will say, let's say I have paid for these particular invoices, but you need some evidence for that. So as I mentioned earlier, you need the proof of payment. So that is an evidence coming from the inquiry and confirmation. Computation. Then, as I in the first lecture, I had mentioned about Micro Small Medium Enterprises Act 2006, wherein the company has to provide for the interest that they need to pay to the small, medium, or micro organizations. So that interest calculation, how they did, even as an auditor, you need to calculate that to verify. So such calculation becomes an evidence for you to verify what is booked by the organization. And the last one is analytical review. Auditing, even if you are checking some recorded transaction, you are working on some historical data, still while arriving at a conclusion, you need to review, you need to analyze the data that is being given to you. On that basis, you can frame your opinion about whether the company is following some standards throughout last, say, 5 years, 10 years. Have they changed their accounting policies? All such opinions you can form by doing the analytical review of earlier data, that is historical data, or the current scenarios. Then the principle of accounting system and internal control. So the scope of audit, overall scope of audit, it depends on the system that is being followed by the organization. Let us say if we have a small entrepreneur who is keeping his books, or who is just posting the accounting entries on the pottery, what you call. Earlier we used to have those red books where people used to write the transactions. They used to have the single entry system of accounting. So if such an organization is there, then in that case you have to have 100% audit, because you cannot rely on what is written there. You have to calculate the things, you have to have a deep dive into it. But let us say if some organization is using some ERP system like SAP, Tally ERP, Oracle, in that case the systems are, there are some inbuilt controls set up in the system which doesn't allow you to commit fraud. I mean that is called mistake proofing. That is called Pokayoke. The meaning of Pokayoke is mistake proofing. So the systems are designed in such a manner that it doesn't allow you to commit a mistake. It doesn't allow you to commit a fraud. Even if you try to, even if you willfully try to do it, it still doesn't allow you to do. So if such an system is in place, then the auditor might go for a sample audit. So from, let's say, 1,000 invoices, they will just ask for 10. And by checking those 10 invoices, if they design some percentage. So from, let's say, from 10 invoices, if more than 8 or 8 invoices details are correct, I don't have any issues, then they close that area. They don't go further into that function for auditing. But let's say if from the 10 invoices, if they see issues in 3 to 4 invoices, then they might select some more samples to auditing. If those samples also fail, they might increase the percentage of samples they want to verify. So the scope of the audit totally depends on the accounting system and the internal control system that is followed. They also check for compliance that is being followed, the disclosure requirements for that particular industry, for that particular organization, whether the organization is disclosing all the required facts in their financial statements, that is audit report, financial statements, P&L, and on that basis they form that opinion of scope of audit. Audit conclusions and report is last principle of auditing. The auditor should form his opinion about accounts on the basis of the audit evidence. He should state his expert opinion on as to whether he is satisfied about the true and fair view of the financial information submitted to him or her, and to the best of his knowledge and as per the evidence collected by him. He should submit his report to the shareholder or client. So client is your client. If it's internal audit, then the report is submitted to the client. If it's the statutory audit and if the shareholders are there, then they have to submit a report to shareholders and file a copy to a registrar of companies. The point is pretty clear that they have to form an opinion on the basis of what is being told to them, what they know about the organization, and whatever explanations they have received, and on the basis of their judgment they need to conclude the audit and share the audit report. So these are the 10 principles of auditing. These are very clear and easy to understand. So if I want to be ethical, what are the points that I need to keep in mind while doing my business? These are the points which explains how and what to do. Then we will cover next point, that is scope of the audit. The scope of the audit, it differs from one audit to other. It depends upon the objective that is set in mind before I start the audit. If let's say it's a statutory audit and if the internal control system is weak, then the scope of audit could be 100%. In case of payables audit, the scope of audit will be limited to the payables of the organization, that is accounts payables. If the scope of audit is indirect taxes, then they will check only for the indirect taxes part. They will not touch upon accounts receivables, accounts payables, they will not touch upon treasury, they will not touch upon HR, they will not touch upon IT. They will not touch upon R&D of the organization. They will just go by the scope that is defined there. Then also, if let's say if some bank has given some loan to the organization, and if they are not able to repay that loan, then the bank may ask for an audit. In such cases, as per bank's requirement, the scope can be defined. So the scope totally depends on what type of audit you want to complete, and then it is planned, and then the auditors do the audit. In case of the financial audits, there are few points that are included in the scope: examination of accounting system and internal check system of the entity, because this is the point which defines further scope of the audit. That's why first thing that the auditor has to cover is the accounting system that is being used by the organization, and the internal control system that is there inbuilt in the system. Verification of arithmetical accuracy of books of accounts. So when you draw some reports, when you take some reports from the system, they have to just check the totals of it. Then let's say if they have taken some invoice copies, if you have raised some invoice on your customer, they will take one sample copy of the invoice to check whether the unit price per unit price multiplied by quantity is showing the correct result or not. If let's say 10 rupees per unit is the price of that product and 10 quantity is there, then the result should be 100 plus whatever taxes are there, and then the final amount. If that calculation is not correct, then that means there is some issue with the internal control. Your internal controls are sacrificed. So they have to check the arithmetical accuracy of the internal check. Verification of the validity of transactions on the basis of vouchers. So as I mentioned earlier, when we talk about vouchers, it's majorly about the provisions that are booked, the cash transactions that are there. So they check for each and every evidence of the cash transactions. If they don't get the evidence of that, they will simply ask you to reverse the expenses that you have booked. So the cash is being mismanaged. It is being recorded incorrectly. That is the opinion they form. So the scope of audit has to include these cash transactions. Most of the big organizations, they do not deal in cash transactions. They normally give some petty cash to the plant or to some function, so that they can spend from that money, they can submit the bills, and the auditing is done by the internal team or a team which is not part of the main team who has spent the money. And then on that basis, whatever, let's say 10,000 was the petty cash given, 7,000 were expenses. So they have to submit bills of 7,000 rupees, and then after receipt of bills, they get the 7,000 again. So the balance at every month end will be 10,000 with them to spend further. Ensure that the final accounts are shown as per the requirement of the relevant act. As I had mentioned in earlier lecture, that the company has to prepare the balance sheet and P&L account according to the Schedule 6 mentioned in the Companies Act 2013. This point talks about that requirement, or the as per the accounting standard 1, whatever the disclosure requirements for that specific organization, for that industry is required, the company has to prepare the books of accounts in that manner. Then applying techniques to check whether the financial statements give techniques to check whether the financial statements give a true and fair view of the financial affairs of the business. So now when we talk about applying techniques, what does that mean? In the earlier years, you must have seen ratio analysis. So equity debt ratio is there, then the accounts payables to sales ratio is there, turnover ratio is there, you have gross profit ratio, you have net profit ratio. There are a lot of ratios defined to check the health of the financial position of the organization. So auditors have to apply these techniques to understand what if the financial statements are showing a true and fair view of the financial position of the organization. Detection of errors and frauds. So typically, let's say if the internal controls of the system that is being used by the organization are weak. In that case, the chances of committing a fraud or making mistakes are more. So, as I had mentioned in the first point, that the scope of the audit totally depends on the accounting system that you follow, that the client is using, and the inbuilt internal checks that are there in the system. So, this last point, detection of errors and frauds, totally depends on the scope of the audit. That means it depends on the accounting system and the internal checks that are there. So, the compliance audit automatically is done by the auditor. So, these are the points that are considered by the auditors before they finalize the scope of the audit, and after finalizing the scope of the audit, then they decide on the plan. So far in today's lecture, we have covered the principles of auditing. First of all, we covered the recap of the first lecture. Now, then we covered the principles of accounting or auditing, and then we talked about the scope of the audit. In the next lecture, we will be covering the errors and frauds in auditing. So, just to give a basic idea about it, error is nothing but error is unintentional. Error is unintentional, but if you do that error intentionally, it becomes a fraud. So it's very easy to understand. So whatever the issues that that will come in your that you will check in future as an auditor, you just need to understand one thing, whether it is intentional or unintentional. If it is unintentional, it can be rectified. There are provisions, there are accounting entries which you need to post after the balance sheet date, and then you can correct the books. But if it's a fraud, then you have to place the responsibility on the specific function, specific person, take the corrective action, check if any other internal controls can be placed so that such errors or such frauds are not happening in future, and then ensure that the books are showing the true and fair view of the financial position of the organization. So with this introduction of errors and frauds in auditing, we will now close for now. We will now close for today, and I will cover that part in the next lecture. Thank you.